Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another tip, trick, technique session. This week we are having a look at LCR panning or further to it. In this video, I'm going to explain why I don't use LCR panning or how I adjust LCR panning to suit the way I like to mix and the reasons for that. So if you watch my previous video, you should pretty easily understand what LCR panning is, but just to give a quick highlight of it, LCR panning just means that you are deciding to adhere to only putting instrumentations in the fully left pan, center, or fully right pan, and that's it. Nothing in between, no little adjustments to that. You are basically doing that, and the concept is supposed to give you a nice open, wide mix. And yeah, that's it, and simple. Okay, so I explained how I did it and showed the process and the results of that process, and even showed you a couple of little potential issues with that. So now I'm going to tell you why I don't do it and how I actually use panning in my mixing situation, but still using some of the concepts of LCR panning. Now, the reason I don't do it is because if you watch the previous video, there was a couple of little issues there. LCR panning works really well when you have a small amount of tracks and it is a very clear-cut sort of song where there's logical places for instrumentation, there's not a lot of clashing, and there's not a lot of things that you want to do across the stereo span as such and create little interesting parts here and there. You want to keep everything in a place roughly around there. Definitely suits, simple rock groups of 4 or 5 instrumentation arrangements, that sort of stuff. And even, like I said, some EDM stuff that is sort of sparse arrangement. Now, of course, you can do complicated mixes with LCR panning as long as you do really good EQ and stuff like that, which you should do anyway. But I find it a little bit more harder, and it takes away some of the interest that I can do without using it. So I like to be able to have the ability to place things in between fully left and fully right and center. And this way I can get instruments out of the way and they can all have their little place in the mix there and create some nice little interest there. Plus, I can do things like with BGVs. Instead of having my BGVs either sitting dead smack in the center or panned out fully left and right, so they sound extremely wide, I can bring them in. And that way you can not have them so wide that they sound unusual, but they're still out of the way of the lead vocalist, but it sounds more like you've got a nice, tighter little group of people singing. Now, I've done this before when I've had a trio singing on a song, and if they were singing like gospel style songs there, and if I had them fully panned left and right and center, it just made them sound too far apart. Okay, they weren't cohesive together. They weren't sitting there. They weren't standing there together. And I had this image of them on a stage, standing pretty close to each other, singing alongside each other. And being able to pan those two BGV or those two other parts of the trio closer in to the center still gave me separation from each of them, but it also gave me the sense of feeling and sound that they were standing next to each other and they were nice and close to each other in a tight group that was singing, together as opposed to singing apart. Now, you also get other situations there where you've got nice big stereo guitars and you have a piano part that I had in the last one that you just can't find a spot for because you don't want it in the center, and putting it on the left or the right just doesn't work. So being able to place that in between the two between center and right or center and left allows it to have its space in the mix, not clashing with anything, but still, it still sounds good. And it's like you've, again, placing the band in positions on the stage. When you look at a band on a stage, okay, let's say it's a big band with quite a few people in it. They're not standing on top of each other on the left and on top of each other on the right and then somebody in the center. They spread themselves out across the stage. You've got a guy right on the left. You might have another one slightly more in. You might have somebody in the center. Then you'll have somebody slightly off to the side, somebody off to there. That's the way I like to imagine a mix there. And again, with a drum kit, not everything is sitting in the center of the drum kit. Not everything is on the left or the right. There's parts that are slightly in between. Perfect example is a hi-hat. It's quite common for people to mix a hi-hat just slightly off to one side, away from the center, and that you can hear it, but it doesn't sound like it's all the way over there or all the way over there. It's just close to the center, but just tucked away a little bit off so that it's not sitting on top of the snare and the kick drum. So anyway, let me show you what I do in my mixes. Okay, we're just going to do a quick brief because obviously every mix is different. So where I place things is going to be totally different in every sort of mix, but I'll give you a general idea of why I do things and how they are. So let's check it out now. All right, so we've got the same mix that I pulled up in the LCR panning example, but what we've got is what I ended up with when I mixed it. Okay, so, and this was not an overly complicated mix. So a lot of this does adhere to LCR panning a lot of the time, but there's some differences, okay, obviously. So we've got our overheads that are fully left and right. Now, I'm going to give you another example of this. I've done mixes before where it was a song that sounded very sort of country style, old vintage style mix. And I actually felt that when the overheads were hitting cymbals and they were appearing in the left and right channels or speakers, it made the drums sound way too wide for the song and didn't suit. So I've had cases where I've actually panned the drums, the overheads in to about 70% just to contain those drums so they don't sound so wide and they come in. So I've done that numerous times before. In this case here, I've left it left and right. And our kick and snare is in the center. So the concept I use, and I take this, like I said, partly from LCR panning, is that to me, the center, the fully left, and the fully right are, in a way, sacred spots. Okay, so they're spots that I want my main elements in. They're the ones that I want things to stand out. Okay, so my snare, my kick, my bass, my lead vocal is in the center. I want them to stand out. Now the bass and that, they're there for different reasons, because it just sounds natural for a bass to be in the center. And because it is a bass element, technically it's not location dependent, even though I don't necessarily agree with that, but it just sounds right in the center. But our lead vocal is in the center for the main reason in that it is the main component of the song. So I want it in the center, standing out. Now my other components is that, for instance here, my distorted guitars, I've got panned left fully and right, because again, they are my main elements when I come to my chorus. I want that big guitar sound coming in for the chorus. So they're fully left and right. Anything that I pull in between there is not necessarily a main element, but I still want them to have their place and to be heard. So in the case of the kit here, whereas in the LCR panning, I had tom 1 and 3 fully left and right, I had to put tom 2 in the center, which means that it would have gone over the top of the vocal or the bass or whatever else. So in this case here, I just tuck it off a little bit. Now, in this song here, it's fully left and right based on the client's request. They really liked the sound of the tom run panning really wide across the stereo field. Now, generally, I don't go that wide. Generally, I would have my toms tucked in a bit because I'm not a big one for super wide tom runs. To me, it sounds unnatural because a drum kit is not that big. Generally, it should not fill the entire stage of where the band's standing. But when a client requests that they like it that big, then that's what I'll do. And I'm not totally against it. It's just not something I normally do. So I'll normally pan them in a little bit to make those tom runs sound a bit more natural to me anyway. And as I mentioned at the start there, I've got my hi-hat panned off just slightly to the left there, just to sort of shake the kit. And, you know, the hi-hat's always off to one side of the drum kit. It's not in the middle. Now, you could argue the snare as well, but, you know, the snare is one of our main elements, so I want it in the center. Our ambience, I've just got panned fully left and right. I'm just keeping that to the full stage there. And the bass, again, we're in the center for our bass tracks. And even though this is sort of a stereo bass track, it is actually a mono signal in there, so it is still coming out the center when I've got it panned fully left and right. Okay, so in the verses, our acoustic guitar is our main rhythm element. So I have them panned fully left and right, okay, because they're our spots for our main elements here. We've got a couple of acoustics in the center here because we had numerous acoustic guitars. And the reason I did this one was because, again, I had the image of, say, a couple of guitarists doing acoustic guitars on the left and right of the stage. And I also had the vocalist in my image playing an acoustic guitar. That's why there's so many acoustic guitars. So he was playing and he's in the center. So it just made logical sense that that was the placement for them. In the choruses, our distorted guitars come in again into our sacred spots here. Fully left, fully right. Big guitars, big sound. Then we come along to our leads here. Okay, this main lead here is doing our main solo. It's stereo, but the main element of it is a mono element, so it is coming into the middle there. And we've got this other little guitar part here, which I played before, and it happens while the vocals are happening. It's a little lead part that's a bit lower in volume. And when it was in the center, it was okay, but I wasn't real happy with that placement. So in my case here, I've got it panned off to the left a little bit, just to give it a different spot. You know, give your ears something interesting to listen to that jumps over to the side there, but not all the way over to the side to get into the way of the acoustics or anything. So I'll play that in a minute so you can hear it. And there's also a delay effect that I have on the guitars. And when we had it fully left and right, it was just way too wide for me. And the ping pong delay effect was just way too wide in the mix. So I've brought that effect in halfway so that our ping pong delay does not go really wide. Just, it's nicely contained. You still get that stereo field. It's a stereo effect. It's just not super, super wide. Now, we also had the problem with the piano. I had to make a decision of, did the piano sit in the center, or did I pan my acoustic guitars fully left, both of them, and put the piano on the fully right? And it didn't quite work to me on the right. You know, it was okay, but it wasn't great. I preferred the acoustic guitars to be stereo and still have this keys element here. And I wasn't happy with the keys element being on the vocal either, because you couldn't really hear it. And for me to have been able to EQ it and mix it and that to get it to stand out, it really would have probably clashed with the vocals. So I wasn't really keen on that. So in this case here, I've just got it panned off slightly to the left again, similar to what I've done with the other ones with the lead guitar and that. So it just sits there in its own little space on the left, just doing its bit. Okay, so everything else sort of is sitting where I want it. The vocals, as I said, they sit in the center because they are the main element of this song. That's what you want, the vocals. But you'll see here, even the effects. Okay, we've got a delay. We've got two delay effects here, and both of them are panned slightly in again because the vocal ping pong style delay I did not want going really super wide and getting on top of the guitars and just sounding like the vocal was taking over the entire song. So I've brought them in so that we still get our nice stereo effect and the vocals become a bit wider, but they're not overtaking the entire mix. They're still tucked in a little bit. They're still fairly wide, you know, we're talking 60% or 60 and above, but it's just brought in a little bit, so it's a little bit more contained and not so super wide. And then everything else is stereo and has its place there. All right, so let's sort of do an example here. So I'm going to play, let's find a part. Let's get to a vocal effect here. All right, so we're just going to play this vocal effect, and then what I'm going to do is I'll let you see hear the delay, and then what I'll do is I'll move the placement so you can hear what it sounds like in the different spots.
It took too long. It's the wrong time now. I'm feeling rather cold. You know my ways. I said all right.
So now let's pan it fully out and just do both of those.
It took too long. It's the wrong time now. I'm feeling rather cold. You know my ways. I said
So see, it's really extremely wide. So, you know, even let's go extreme. Let's bring it even narrower in. Okay, so bring them tighter in.
it took too long. It's the wrong time now. I'm feeling rather cold. You know my ways. I said.
Okay, so that might be a little bit too tight because that's not what I had it set to. But you can hear it's not getting in the way of the acoustic guitars. It's not jumping out all the way to the sides. It creates a nice effect, but it's just not overpowering it.
It took too long. It's the wrong time now. I'm feeling rather cold. You know my ways.
Okay, so that's the point of that there. So let's check out the other components of the keyboards here. Okay, so you can hear, if I solo it, it's just sitting over to the left there. So it's
It took too long. It's the wrong time.
let's just mute the vocals. So you can notice them when they're gone, all right? They're not over the top, okay? This is not my main element in the song, but you can hear them, and they're filling out that spot there between the center and the far left where the acoustic guitars are. They're not sitting on the acoustic guitars getting in the way. They're not sitting in the center getting in the way of the vocal. We've got a nice spot just sitting over there, tucked in nicely. You can hear them fairly clearly. Like I said, not over the top, but they're still there and you can hear them. Let's have a look at this guitar track here. So just going to find where that lead is. And here it is. So you can hear that sort of tucked over to the center there, not the center. You can hear that's tucked over to the left a bit there. So if we bring our vocals back in.
Oh, why'd you do that? Oh, why'd you say that? Oh, why it can't be? Oh, man.
So again, this lead guitar part has its spot in the mix. It's not sitting on top of the distorted guitars that are panned left and right fully. It's not sitting on the vocal in the center. It has a nice little spot over to the left. You can almost imagine staring up at the stage and there's a guitarist standing in between a guitarist and the lead singer playing a little lead part. So if we were to put it into the center. So it's sort of fighting with the vocals there. But we bring it back. And it's just got a nice spot there. And our drums, well, you know, they're tiny little tweaks on the drums here, so it's not going to be a major difference here. It's just getting it out of the way of the vocals and the hi-hat, just moving it over a little bit. Just sounds a bit more natural to me. All right, so there you go. That is my concept of LCR panning and why I don't adhere to it in my mixes. I just like that flexibility of being able to have the rest of the space in the stereo field to place other instruments and give them their own little special spot and fill up the stereo field with interesting little parts and things like that. So obviously, as I said, I use the core basics of the LCR panning as such to place my main elements, but then I've got greater flexibility and less hassle of trying to stop clashes and things like that, and get a lot more interest as you're sitting there listening to have things poke in and out and pop left and right, but without getting in the way of everything else. So let me know what you think of that. Let me know if you adhere to the LCR panning or if you prefer my concept or you do it a different way again. However you do it, just let me know. I'd interested to hear. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell to get notifications of new videos. And yeah, ask me any questions in the comments. Hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.